Right, it is almost 10 o'clock. So I'm just going to wait a couple minutes and see how many people get logged on. Let's see, I've got 2 of you right now. Hey, Wes. Excuse me. About 1 more minute. Hey, Reagan. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So we know so far that they meaning John and Marta, assume that the boy does have some type of language based on his taps. Hey, Q. And they realized that he was communicating with both the cow and the beagle. We ended last chapter where John brought home Jacob a guitar, okay? And they watched him for a little bit first, and then they listened to him, and they said it was like the boy just like could control their emotions. He was making such wonderful music. All right, chapter 17. Twice a week, John drove farther afield to towns small and large, sifting through gossip and local papers. What he was discovering was that boys were as likely to go missing as cows were. George's boy run off, but came home with his tail between his legs. My cow broke right through the new fence. Carl's kid, that one with the hair, he was gone for 4 days. And you know where they found him? In the hayloft over at Augie's place. My prize Blackie cow, you've seen her, right? Gone for 2 days. Comes home with a big smile on her face. Okay, so this is all the talk in the town. Then you see this written, how the author writes it. You can kind of see how the font is different. It almost looks like these are flyers maybe that have been passed around. Missing. 12-year-old boy, mean as a stick. You can keep him. Missing. Pretty brown cow, answers to Betty. Found. 12-year-old boy, mean as a stick. Come get him. Found. Brown cow, not so pretty. All the boys and cows that were lost seemed to turn up again, though unlike the boy at John and Marta's, who had been found, but oddly wasn't lost. In all the time he had been at John and Marta's, the boy hadn't seemed afraid, didn't seem to miss anyone, slept soundly, and ate. It's like he was dropped right out of the sky, John told Marta. Although John was impressed as Marta was with Jacob's talents, he was beginning to worry that the boy wasn't learning any boy things, and he said as much to Marta. What are you talking about? She said. What kind of boy things? He rides a cow now, doesn't he? True, that's good, I guess, John said. But what else do you want him to do? Chop down a tree? Burn the barn? I don't know. I mean, I guess just get a little dirty, I guess. For heaven's sake, John, he gets dirty. I ought to know. I'm the one trying to get the dirt out of his and your clothes. Still, John was bothered. So one day he took Jacob and the beagle and the 2 fishing rods with him to the creek. His plan was to show the boy how to dig for bait and bait a hook and catch a fish. Along the way, Jacob snatched a maple leaf and folded it into the shape of a bird. He picked up a stick and drummed it on tree trunks. He bobbed and jigged along the path with the beagle by his side. At a puddle, he stopped and put his fingers through the muck, and at the bottom, painted his arms with stripes of mud. At the edge of the creek, he gathered a pile of stones and rocks and threw them into the water with a rhythmic plip, plop, 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 plip. When John dug up an earthworm and reached for his rod and hook, Jacob put his palm out as if asking for the worm. And once he had it, he reburied it. But that's our bait, John said. Jacob tapped lightly on John's arm. Tap, 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 and returned to gathering more stones. He dug a trench along the creek bank and lined it with stones and packed the sides with mud. John watched as the boy collected twigs and leaves and built a strange sort of elfin bridge over the trench. Then Jacob climbed up on a boulder and jumped into the creek with all of his clothes on. He splashed and laughed his silent laugh and then climbed back up on the rock and jumped again into the water. He crawled back up the muddy bank and took John's hand and beckoned the beagle, inviting them to join him. Marta took one look at the wet, muddy man, boy, and dog as they returned to the house. Well, John, she said, is he dirty enough for you? So John took him to the creek to go fishing, and we realized when they got there that Jacob kind of had some skills, right? He built his own trench. He started putting mud on his arms, kind of like body paint, and he did not want to use the earthworm as bait. He put it back into the ground. Chapter 19. More weeks passed. Why doesn't anyone know about this boy? John asked. We need to get him some clothes. He's looking shabby. Did you hear me, Marta? Why doesn't anyone? I heard you, and I don't know the answer to your question. But I do know that the boy needs some clothes. They drove to the nearest town with a clothing store, like 30 miles away. At the counter, the clerk glanced down at the boy and said, What a quiet lad you are. What's your name? The boy just smiled up at her. Cat got your tongue? He's shy, John said. How old are you? The clerk asked the boy. The boy tilted his head and blinked. 7, Marta said. 6, John said. Oops. The clerk winked at Marta. Oh, I know. My husband can never keep track of our kids' ages either. The boy had twisted around to look at a woman and a young girl standing in line behind them. The boy put his hand up, palm toward the girl, and the girl raised her own palm and tapped his. The boy waggled his arms in a silly way, and the girl did the same. Kids, the woman said to Marta, crazy kids. The boy knocked his knees together, and the girl did the same. Marta felt such pride. Yes, she said, crazy kids. Chapter 20. In the middle of fixing dinner, Marta said, John, the boy needs to be around other kids. I know, but how are we going to do that? He needs a friend his own age. He's got friends. He's got the dog, the cow. John, I know. I'll go nose around. I'll see what I can come up with. He went to town and came home with a present for the boy. But John, what about the friend? Did you find him a friend? No, but look at these. I traded that old hat of mine for these. It was a used painting set, 10 dimpled watercolor cubes, a frayed brush, and a pad of yellowed paper. The boy touched each color cube lightly as if they were as fragile as a butterfly's wings. Marta brought him a cup of water and showed him how to dip the brush in the water, then swirl it on the paint cube. The boy leaned forward, grasping the brush, swirling it over the red, and sweeping an arc across the paper. He bent close to the paper, his hand moving. He filled up an entire sheet, trying every color, blending them, dotting, and swishing the brush as if his hand was made to do exactly what it was doing. He looked up at Marta and John, and then at the next blank sheet of paper. Sure, John said, go right ahead. The boy painted all afternoon. He painted until it was dark. He painted the next day and the next day and the next until the cubes were worn down and all the paper had been used. What started as swirly shapes quickly evolved into recognizable animals: cows, dogs, goats, flowers, trees, cabins, barns, and bridges. But the scenes were unusual. Dogs stood on top of cows, flowers grew out of chimneys, bridges connected to houses, barns roosted in treetops. Where does he come up with this stuff? John asked. I don't know. I think he's a genius. Chapter 21. Marta, we need to ask about the boy again. He needs to be around some kids of his own age. Marta, not all day, but now and then. John went into town. This time, when he stopped at the sheriff's office, the sheriff came in while John was studying the bulletin board for new notices. You looking for something? The sheriff said. He was a stocky, muscular man, his shirt tight across his chest. He had a habit of rubbing his thumb across his badge, as if to remind people exactly who he was. I was wondering something. Is that right? Well, a cow wandered onto our property, and I've been waiting for someone to claim her, but no one has. Is that right? I don't see any notices here about missing cows. The sheriff rubbed his thumb across his badge. But if someone claims it, how do I know it really belongs to that someone? The sheriff looked from John to the receptionist, Darlene, and back again. Would you be suggesting that someone might lie about owning that cow? He aimed a finger at John's face. I was just wondering, let's say a couple weeks go by and no one claims that cow, and I'm just looking after it, right? I'm not stealing it, and somebody comes along and says it's his cow. Yeah, so I wouldn't be accused of stealing that cow, would I? Well, did you steal it? No, like I said, then what are you so worried about? Well, I was just wondering, what if someone said I stole it? Well, if you didn't steal it, they'd be lying. And if you did steal it, well, then I didn't steal it. Then what's the problem? Should I have reported it? The cow, I mean. And how would I do that? How would you do what? Report it. Report the cow. You want to report a cow? The sheriff turned to his receptionist. Now that's a new one. He wants to report a cow. That's a new one, all right. John thought, if they don't understand about a cow, how are they going to understand about the boy? John left the sheriff's office and stopped at the general store, where he traded in a leather belt for a sack of jelly beans and a harmonica. So, I don't really think John was talking so much about the cow. He really was using the cow to kind of see what the sheriff would think about him reporting a missing boy. Because I think he's worried that someone's going to show up for the boy and John's not going to know if that's really the people that the boy belongs to. One more chapter, 22. John and Marta stood at the barn doors listening to the boy play the harmonica to his audience, the cow, the beagle, and the goats. The cow rested her head on the top fence rail. The beagle lay on the ground between the cow's forefeet, and the baby goats were uncharacteristically still, leaning against each other, gazing at the boy. It was a slow, hypnotic tune he played. We've got to ask him some more questions, Marta. But we've tried, and he seems so far away when we ask, as if he doesn't understand the simplest things. And yet other times he's so capable and smart, but quiet, just very, very quiet. They tried to find out how old he was, but he didn't seem to know. They asked if he had any brothers and sisters, but he merely shrugged in reply. They asked if it was his parents who left him on the porch, but he shrugged again. Do you have parents? John asked. John, shh. Well, does he or not? Jacob, do you have parents? Mother, father? Jacob rested his chin in his hand, elbow propped on the table. He looked sleepy. Is someone coming to get you? John pressed. Jacob looked around the room, as if the answer might be there. Do you want someone to come and get you? John, well, I'm just asking. Do you, Jacob? Do you want someone to come and get you? The boy yawned. What's the matter with him? Can't answer a simple question? John, stop that. Maybe it's not a simple question. Maybe, oh, now, look what you've done. A tear slipped down the boy's cheek. Now look, Marta said, springing to the boy's side. We've hurt his feelings. How did we do that? Kids are sensitive. You ought to know that. You're just a great big kid yourself. All right. So we are going to stop there. Very interesting. So obviously Jacob is feeling something because he showed some emotion when he let a tear fall when John was asking about his parents or if he wanted someone to come and take them from their house. So we will have to keep reading and see what happens. All right, check your Canvas inbox and I will see you in just a couple minutes in Zoom. All right, bye guys.